Welcome to Sports Geek, the podcast built for sports digital and sports business professionals. And now, here's your host who loves playing with new technologies, Sean Callanan.
Thanks, DJ Joel. I'm Sean Callanan, and welcome to episode 381 of Sports Geek. This week, I chat with Eray Saban. He's the Assistant General Manager at ASM Jacksonville and Director at Everbank Stadium. Thank you very much for listening. You might be doing so at sportsgeekhq.com, where all the episodes of Sports Geek are housed, but you could also be doing so on your favourite podcast platform. If you are able to, leave a review or rate the podcast. We've got over 100 reviews on Apple Podcasts. We really do appreciate it, but even better, send a tweet, post it out, send a DM to someone and tell someone about the podcast. We really do appreciate it. Remember, you can follow or stalk Sports Geek across all social media channels. You can follow us on LinkedIn, Instagram, X, and Facebook. I hope to see you at Seed Conference. You can register for Seed Conference at seedconference.com, and you can use the code SportsGeek, all one word, just in this instance for 10% off. As always, you can reach me, Sean Callanan, across all social media platforms at Sean Callanan, or you can use email, sean@sportsgeekhq.com. I love hearing from podcast listeners, and even more, I love working with podcast listeners. So please reach out. I'd love to help you. Please enjoy my chat with Eray Saban. Welcome to Eray Saban. He's the Assistant General Manager at ASM Jacksonville and Director at Everbank Stadium in Jacksonville. Eray, welcome to the podcast.
Thanks for having me, Sean. Really happy to be here.
Not a problem at all. Not a problem at all. You're in Jacksonville, but strangely enough, your accent is a lot like mine. Coming from Melbourne, I want to always get started with how did you get your start in sports? And what about yourself? How did you get your start in the world of sports?
Yeah, it's interesting. I actually started my sort of venue management, event management industry in the dance music industry. So Stereosonic, a large-scale dance music festival that was in stadiums, although obviously a lot of AFL stadiums as well, which was brilliant, and large showgrounds. But soon I sort of realised, Sean, that there's an interesting dynamic that was happening there with people passing away, and unfortunately, not sort of the industry I wanted to be in. So really, truly found my my space in sports, working with Tennis Australia and the Australian Open in the major Grand Slam tennis tournament. So that was just exceptional to see what a true world-class state-of-the-art event looks like, and we kicked it off there, and predominantly in the event operation space, working with a lot of people. Obviously, Melbourne Olympic Park as the main venue there, and working with a large client like Tennis Australia was just incredible to see the level of professionalism and what they were able to achieve. So that sort of kicked off my journey.
I mean, it is a great event to get started and understand all the opportunities and all the manic nature is of a major event of the Aussie Open. But you sort of found yourself drawn to that event and stadium side, and then you went further down the road to what was then Etihad Stadium and has since been renamed Marvel, going into that stadium and event manager sort of role.
Yeah, so that was an interesting one. I mean, just learning so much from Tennis Australia. Naturally, there was a little bit of a similar dynamic working into one of arguably the largest, multi-purpose venues in the world. 55,000 seating capacity, but doing concerts for 75,000 plus. Having that exposure with obviously the Australian Football League and the Big Bash League, and at the time the Hyundai A League, but then having all those world-class international events was really what was just exceptional. Largest UFC attendance, Adele, Ed Sheeran, Taylor Swift, Justin Bieber, U2, Foo Fighters, all the big acts that are touring the world really always made their stop through Marvel, and just that time spent there over 5-6 years was just exceptional for the development, and really helped pivot understanding what sports is like, but also entertainment as well. And as we navigate through the sports and entertainment industry now, these stadiums are being used more and more for entertainment and becoming less for sports, just given how popular they are, and these stadium tours that are just taking the world by storm, which was really exciting. And then obviously helped me transition over to Hong Kong as well at the time.
Yeah, so like you were at Marvel when Marvel took on the naming rights, and also the stadium itself was going through a bit of a transformation. Getting 25, 30 years into its life, and looking for a tech refresh and a fan refresh to sort of how can they tweak the experience. What was it like? One, going through that phase of transformation, but also, like you said, hosting big concerts, still hosting AFL matches, still hosting big back matches, having that balance of how do you refresh a stadium and effectively on the run, because there was no real long shutdown period that you sometimes see.
Yeah, and I sort of left the business from Marvel once they truly got into the nitty-gritty of it, but I was right into it with the planning stages, and, there was just so many fundamentals to go through. We see it now, obviously, stadiums are getting a lot of redevelopments or new builds completely, and what comes with that is a lot of coordination. There's obviously the design phase going straight into the operational phase, and I think early indications of just what needed to be achieved and how many people needed to say in to make sure that it was getting done correctly was the most alerting thing, more so than anything. Making sure you've got the right people that are making the right decisions and providing the right feedback well before, obviously, the dollars are being spent. So that was really interesting to watch, and still staying in close contact with the team at Marvel, given how long I spent there, and they just told me how it was like navigating through it, and they did such a great job. And I was actually back in Australia early on in this year, and I got to check it out, and mate, it's unbelievable what a refresh does to a stadium. And although Marvel presented really well for a stadium at the time when I was there, that was 20, 21, 22, 3 years old, but it just looks exceptional now, and it's a real testament to what the team's been able to achieve there, and what it means for the people not only of Melbourne but the world that head to Marvel Stadium and check it out. It's truly a world-class facility.
So you're lucky enough to get a good grounding in a world-class event that is, the Australian Open, and see what events look like on that stage in Melbourne, and then work with a stadium like Eddie had to Marvel, and then you did start to have a world view going across to Hong Kong for K-Tak Park Sports Park. Hopefully, I'm saying that right. What was it like? What was it like going from Melbourne, which we're very proud as a really strong sports city, to Hong Kong and seeing how, I guess, the stadiums are different, but also how the fans and the consumers coming to the stadiums might be a little bit different?
Yeah, Sean, for those that don't know much about Kai-Tak Sports Park, it is truly an unbelievable world-class project that's about to go live in January next year. It consists of a 55,000-seat retractable roof stadium, a 10,000-seat arena, 5,000-seat public sports ground, and a whole bunch of retail. It's by the Hong Kong government, but ASM Global will be the operator out there, and have been actively involved with a consortium including New World Development Group and also Populous as the architect, and a whole bunch of other people as well. It was just incredible to watch. I mean, I think working on a construction project was something that was just so fantastic for me, because you truly get to provide feedback and positively influence a project before it actually goes live. And just, changing a landscape of turning from an operator to really on the construction mode on how can you tweak things on things that are a problem or a pain point or something that's really important to these major tours or sporting teams on what they want to see in these buildings. So, I predominantly was focused on the stadium, just given my history, and I learned a hell of a lot, but I also was able to positively influence a hell of a lot as well. With that, it was just incredible. I mean, you take for granted, again, I think as much as working at Marvel and Tennis Australia was positive, just how multicultural Australia and especially Melbourne is as well, gives you that exposure of just working with different people and different personalities. Hong Kong, predominantly, obviously, a local environment, sitting in the room as a expat, and being one of few expats in a room full of people that are local, is just really an eye-opening experience, because you're sitting there and not only educating, but you're also giving them a global perspective on things they're probably not too familiar with. But then also understanding the different dynamics. I can't tell you how many times I popped out to other buildings and, the Hong Kong Stadium, which is, about to close its doors, but just seeing how the people operate there as well, and what the behaviours are, whether it's in an arena environment or a stadium environment, and sort of what the people of Hong Kong look for, because we can easily think that you can apply what happens in Melbourne, Australia, and just plonk it straight into Hong Kong, or pull from the UK, or pull from North America, where I am now, and just think that everything's going to operate one and the same. And one of the things I learned really quickly is the behaviours are extremely different, but there's still a lot of similarities, and just being able to positively impact that event or that venue was something that I'm really, really proud of and really holds dear to my heart. The experience was fantastic.
Yeah, I do think, I remember when, Eddie had opened and it had a little bit of that. It was very much a US, a North American design and flow and how the fans came in. But, the foot traffic and the way Australians turn up to a game is very different to North Americans in when they buy a ticket, when they arrive at a game, those kind of things. I would have thought, there would have been a lot in you learning that piece, in Hong Kong on, how they turn up, where they go, but then also looking at those global trends of what does a precinct look like, no longer just a stadium by itself. What does the design of the precinct look like to help that flow? The thing that I find interesting, like that's always changing, but, plans are in place, construction starts. How hard is it? You're sort of saying, pointing at some of those issues, like you go, we've just seen another stadium do this. Can we make this change? Those discussions would have been quite robust, but, trying to get those things in at the last moment or realising something needs to be slightly tweaked would have been probably one of the big challenges while you're in that construction phase.
Absolutely. And one thing's for sure, even look at the likes of SoFi and Allegiant and US Bank Stadium over here, the newer buildings that have gone up, nobody gets it perfect. And you find the first few years, once they open those doors, they spend, a notable amount of capital improvements just fixing what they didn't get right. I think for me is that so many things look like they are the way they should on these plans and, in the likes of 2D plans, but then also in Hong Kong, we were working with a product called BIM, which was pretty much 3D modeling through a computer where you could actually walk the spaces virtually. You still won't get everything right. And that's the reality as well. I think the majority is you look at your high ticket items, the things you really want to get right, you focus on them. And as long as they're in there, the rest of them you sort of adapt to depending on the building. And, you have those policies where you make it work. And Marvel is no different. 20 years on, the way they operate the stadium, there's always new things to improve, and a redevelopment's going to make you reshape and rethink the way you do that as well.
So in 22, you moved across to the US as director of Everbank Stadium to Jacksonville. Tell us a little bit about Everbank Stadium as a facility.
Yeah, from Hong Kong to Florida, it doesn't get much more different than that, I always say. But, really, really excited to be here in Jacksonville and scary that it's coming up, in December as 2 years. Time truly does fly when you're having fun. So home of the Jacksonville Jaguars, although they pronounce it Jaguars over here, which took me some time to adapt to. Obviously, it's that language barrier there. But no, really, really exceptional stadium. So we can house about 70,000 Jags fans here on an NFL game day. But we also play host to pretty much some standard yearly events we have. So Monster Jams here every year, really, really big event here in Jacksonville, get about 40 to 50,000 people here. Taxslayer Gator Bowl has been here for a really long time as well, really influential and important event for the city of Jacksonville. And then another one that's really, really important is the Florida-Georgia game. It's arguably the largest neutral site rivalry between the University of Florida and the University of Georgia. I can't explain to you, Sean, I think about the likes of Tennis Australia and the Australian Open and how influential and how big that event is. This event for a college football game is just incredible. It's a week-long thing. There is, 70 to 80,000 people in the building and probably another 120,000 outside tailgating and just being a part of the action just because they're nearby the stadium. Just the rich history of those two schools is something that, I probably underestimated coming over here, but it was my first Florida-Georgia last year, and I was just blown away by the passion, the energy, and how important the event is to the city and the amount of people it brings in terms of tourism dollars, but also just exposure from the Jacksonville community is just sensational. We built out some additional bleachers in the stadium as well, that ability to again scale up the stadium as well. So when you talk about an older building, and it's no secret we are one of the older buildings in the NFL, and obviously we're discussing at the moment what that looks like for the stadium of the future. But just looking at what that does and how the stadium presents on a Florida-Georgia Saturday at 3:30 when that ball kicks is something that really. One day, if the time's up and I do leave Jacksonville, it'll be one of my fondest memories because it's just something that is truly sensational and a true spectacle to watch.
So when you get an event like that, your stadium really does grow. It's not just the fence around the stadium and here's the amount of people that are inside the stadium. When you've got that tailgate experience and effectively building out these, almost a temporary precinct that they're bringing themselves, like what different challenges and opportunities does that provide you as the, from a venue point of view to say, well, our stadium isn't just the perimeter of people walking into the stadium. It's this whole precinct, and there's another 100,000 people out there. What are some of the pieces that make that special in that it's bigger? But you must be leaning on. I always joke that the Australian Open's footprint keeps getting bigger and bigger every year to a point where I walk out my front door in Richmond and there's the Australian Open. Is it a little bit that way when that college game kicks off?
Yeah, it's funny because I somewhat feel a level of confidence on everything that's happening within the fence line because I can control that. It's outside the fence line you can't necessarily control, and it really is a spectacle. I mean, the amount of tailgating, for an NFL game, we open our lots about 4 hours prior and you have tailgating. These guys some of them are starting on Monday or Tuesday with RV City. They're bringing in, these RVs that are $200,000 worth and they're parking in a lot and they're setting up camp for the whole week. So you've got some additional challenges as it relates to they're still in the city managed lots that we manage. So your responsibility truly pushes further out there and you can't necessarily do a whole lot more either. So it's really around containment and safety, obviously, is the forefront of the mind, but really just making sure people enjoy themselves too, because, people are driving down from Gainesville or Athens in Georgia. So they're making the commute down here to spend a week in Jacksonville. So we also don't want to be the fun police, but, we're really, really grateful. We've got such a great working relationship with the major partners in the city of Jacksonville. So Jacksonville Sheriff's Office, which is our police force, Jacksonville Fire and Rescue Department, and the Emergency Preparedness Department as those three pivotal figures, along with the likes of the Department of Homeland Security and the FBI and a number of other partners I'm definitely not mentioning. We just have such a really cool consolidated plan that we build out quite tightly with the city of Jacksonville, mayor's office and just in general, just to make sure we're all aligned on what that plan and response looks like. And it's unbelievable. And I always say, I think one thing's for sure, everybody's got to come and experience Florida, Georgia at least once.
And then you've got that other part, which is always a challenge for a venue operator. You can have your consistent tenant like the Jags, and those fans know where they're going. They have that ritual of either going to their tailgate, going to their seat or their section, or to a bar that they know. But then, then you've got someone that turns up once a year or makes that bucket list trip to be at that game. What sort of challenges, from a wayfinding, making sure their experience is, at the level that you want it to be? What are some of the things that you do to sort of make sure that does happen?
Yeah, and it extends to, we just went through 3 sold-out concerts with 2 Luke Combs shows and George Strait and Chris Stapleton and Little Big Town back-to-back weekends, so 3 shows in 7 days. And we talk about it collectively is, we take for granted that the Jags fans know exactly where they're going when they come in. But when you have all these people from out of town for a Florida, Georgia, or a Gator Bowl, or even a Monster Jam, or obviously the stadium concerts, it's all around education. So the additional layers of the guest experience and keeping an active eye on it as well. So whether it's our staff from safe management that do our guest services and security, or the Jags guest services team that work all events, but extending out to all our building partners as well is to be alert and be aware. Really make sure that we communicate well in advance before they get here, through social media posts, through know before you goes, through just basic messaging and push notifications and emails, educating the public as well as possible on what's happening in the complex and when to arrive and what the rules and regulations are for these events or prohibited items. But then it also extends when they arrive on site. We always tell our staff, just be a little bit more patient, really just to articulate and explain to people a little bit more on where they need to go, and obviously looking at additional signage at those stages as well, and always room for improvement as well on where we can continually improve. And again, it's not necessarily that you have to wait for a new stadium to do that. You can definitely do that in real time, and there's always dynamic ways to do so.
And you talked a little bit there about concerts and having in big events. You're still in pitch mode, trying to get new content. What are some of the things that music performers or other options like Monster Jam are looking for in a stadium when you're saying, hey, come to Jacksonville, here's what we can offer?
Yeah, it's always around accessibility. One of our greatest positives but greatest challenges is that we still are 100% natural grass. So that does have additional complexities compared to these new buildings. It's not like an Allegiant or a State Farm Stadium in Arizona, which are also ASM Global managed buildings where you can roll the turf out. So we do have those additional challenges, but we look all around programming. We are naturally a smaller market compared to, obviously a New York or an LA or a Boston or a Chicago or Atlanta. So, our calendar on the back end post NFL season does have a little bit more flexibility to have those date ranges that other places don't have. For us, it's always about, being open and willing to explore anything. And that's always the case. And I think even if you're in those larger markets, that's the mentality too, is trying to make these stadiums as more purposeful and not just an NFL building year round, because I think it's so important to, especially those people that are engaging in these stadiums, whether they're city built or, team ownership built, everybody wants that return on investment, right? So additional content is always important, and we're always pushing to get it, that's for sure, here in Jacksonville.
And then from a stadium point of view, you were talking about, new stadiums coming out and then working out some of those teething problems as as you start seeing the foot traffic and seeing how the flows of the stadiums. And then you've got, well-established stadiums and, maintaining what you've got, but then also, trying to look for those little surprise and delights and keeping the fans happy and keeping your tenants happy and providing some of those things that they're looking for. What are you looking to do there in Everbank to keep it as refreshed and as new as you can for an older stadium?
Yeah, I always talk about look at industry trends, and I think the biggest part for us is, ASM Global operates 7 NFL buildings too. Some are new, some are a little bit older, some are somewhere in between, right? So for us, it's, again, not just the ASM Global network, but using our NFL network as well to really leverage what people are doing as industry best practice or fun and new ideas. I think COVID, and I hate referring to COVID, especially as a Melburnian, because we all know what we went through, that I think a lot of the world doesn't necessarily know, not that to discount anyone's experience of that. But I think COVID really hit the reset button on stadiums stop being so cagey. I think they were very cagey before then on sharing information and knowledge and ideas, where I think that really changed post-COVID, because I think it's that mentality of if somebody's doing a good job, you share that information, because I think if one stadium wins, we all win. And again, it's just going above and beyond for these promoters and also the people that are coming to our building week in, week out, trying to spend their dollars, whether it's on ticketing, food and beverage, parking, whatever it may be, really making sure they have the best experience possible. So I think for me, it's the collaboration piece, Sean, that's really taken a forefront of my mind, and definitely something that I look to do. And it doesn't have a barrier of whether it's an ASM Global venue or another competing venue or whatever it may be. I think we're all swimming in the same direction, so to speak, and I want to make sure that we're sharing that information and being as collaborative as possible. Has
there been a project, whether it's been a new technology or even just operational, that you've been able to apply at Everbank, that you've been able to say, hey, that is a problem, big or small, but we've made that slight change and you've seen a real uplift that you can share?
Yeah, my team will always speak about my fixation with drones at the moment. So drone detection for open-air stadiums is just unbelievable. And I think for me, it's my greatest concern as a venue operator, because it's not much that you can do about it. So unlike Australia I think I saw it at the Grand Prix, where they can actually cut down the drones, pretty much unless it's the presidential inauguration over here, you cannot stop a drone from entering your seating bowl. So as an open-air stadium, that is my greatest fixation at the moment, and has been probably for the last 18 months, is how do we combat and how do we educate, but then how do we also prevent? So one of the big projects that the NFL initially mandated was drone detection technology, which Jacksonville has been leading the charge on. I think we're one of the first NFL buildings to implement drone detection technology, but not sort of sitting on our laurels with what we had. A project that I'm really passionate about, and we did introduce the last 12 months, was upgraded drone detection technology, which actually has CCTV attached to it, so you can actually identify whether a drone has a payload, has the ability to identify not just DJI drones, but non-DJI drones, which is the less common drones. So just being understanding of what's in the sky at all times is something that I've been passionate about. And as much as it's that investment on a capital expenditure part on investing in the new technology, the main part's the education piece. And I've got a few plans up my sleeve for this this prior to this season on how do we get more and more drone operators into our building prior to these events to educate them on the implications. Because to put it plain and simply, and we saw it in Baltimore this year, and we also saw it for the Florida-Georgia event here, as soon as a drone breaks that seating bowl, the game stops. So the implications of somebody that is generally just an innocent person trying to get a good photo, the complications and implications from a sponsorship perspective, but also from an operational perspective, are quite substantial. So that's sort of the one project I've been passionate about, and it's one of those things that will never truly end until you put roofs and closed roofs on these stadiums, I suppose. But then obviously that impacts obviously what the field feels like as well. So it's a trade-off, that's for sure.
And then from a Jags being a major tenant, what are some of the things that you're working with the Jags on, improving game day, whether that be the entertainment on the field, pre-game, during the game, what it's like as you're coming in as a Jags fan? What are some of the things that you've worked with the Jags on to level up? Because there is that keep up with the Joneses that every NFL team's looking over their shoulder at other teams saying, hey, what can we do? How do you help them as a venue to deliver that game day?
Yeah, Sean, I've always been the same with this, even at Marvel with our tenants. We had 7 tenants at Marvel, 5 in the AFL, 1 in the Big Bash, and at the time Melbourne Victory in the A-League. And it's always starting from a place of exploring to say yes. I think too often we sort of chop it down. So sort of that's always been my philosophy well before arriving in Jacksonville. But some of the main ones that we've done over here is we transitioned to 100% mobile parking. So for context on how big that is, for a lot of places, you'd probably think that's pretty standard. Jacksonville doesn't have the greatest public transport network. Pretty much non-existent. So all 70,000 fans that are coming to the game are coming by car, whether that's parking or Uber. And our parking space is just given with the amount of development happening around downtown Jacksonville is only getting less and less. So we worked quite collaboratively on that one last season, and that was a major success. And that had a lot of parts to it. So we had obviously the Jags, us, the Jacksonville Sheriff's Office, traffic management teams, and a whole raft of other departments just to try and get them together and making sure that we stayed level up with that as well. And we're always trying to continually improve, probably more on the external now, around, what does rideshare look like and what does that experience look like? So that's a new big project at the moment for us. And again, the NFL does a thing called the Voice of the Fans. With that is pretty much a grading that goes out to people, both season ticket holders and one-off ticket purchasers about their experience. So they do some audits, they do some results, and they send them back to us individually as teams and as buildings. So we refresh them, we look at that, and there's things that we want to tweak from there. And that's generally where a lot of our projects come, especially with an impending new build here, potentially in the next few years. It's really around the experience piece more so than what we're spending money on as investing in capital purchases.
I mean, it's a really good point. The game time and, when the first kickoff is and how long the game is. But really, for the fan, the game does start 3 hours before, 4 hours before, 5 if they're coming to tailgate to drive in. And if that initial half an hour, 45-minute experience to get a park, figure out where you're going is really poor, it just sets the day off on the wrong foot. So, rolling out, the mobile parking and making that experience easier does again set the day right for the fan, and it is something that I've seen a lot of stadiums look at that as a solution, especially when they are most fans are used to clicking a button on their phone and getting a car and getting a spot, and so it's like that experience should extend to the stadium
for sure. And it's all digitalized these days as well. I mean, buildings went cashless, obviously, with COVID, but mobile ticketing and everything's just digitalized now, and it gives you the flexibility to transfer your tickets as well. And that flexibility is just substantial because you're finding that less and less people are wasting their parking passes or their parking tickets as well with that ability to transfer or access it on their digital device.
And are you also getting, better data from that? So going from a system where there is someone handing out tickets and taking cash and all of those kind of things where you're not knowing how many cars are coming through and what a customer is doing, you can start making better plans, season on season because what that flow looks like?
Yeah, and even as it extends to like our events, that were special events, where we don't have season ticket holders. Like if you look at the stadium concerts, we're pre-selling lots, so we know how to resource in those areas as well, and how to communicate to those people who are ahead of time. So you're not just relying on social media; you're also able to communicate directly to those that have pre-purchased parking tickets, and incentivizing that's really critical too. So having a cheaper price, obviously, prior to arriving to the stadium lots, always encourages people to pre-purchase, but also gets us a whole lot of more data.
And so you're an Australian in Jacksonville. You've got a couple of mates this year. You've got two Aussies on the Jags roster with Adam Gotsis and now Patrick Murtagh, formerly Golden Sun, on the roster. But do you have any advice for people who might be starting their sports business career in any part of the world that want to, move out of their own country, maybe go to the US or try their hand in different parts? Do you have any advice for those people looking to expand their career internationally?
Yeah, I mean, my first thing I'll always say is it's never easy. I mean, it's never easy to try and convince, whether you're an Australian or an expat in any capacity, somebody in the US to hire somebody that's not in the US, right? Obviously, there's a raft of legalities and challenges or hurdles, I like to say, more so than anything, because they're not, everything's possible. It's just be really relentless with it as well. And it's so worthwhile. I think, I think my greatest appreciation thus far is just how welcoming everybody's been, but then also looking back and saying, hey, Australia is really on the map with these large scale events. We do a really, really good job. And I think, the more people that can understand that Australians can come over and do it in North America or Europe or wherever it may be, it just really builds that respect in the industry as well, because I think we do a really good job in Australia. And I think sometimes being so far away and probably having sports that aren't that familiar. I mean, we speak about the Australian Open, but, you speak about, the Australian Football League, arguably the largest sport in Australia, but not many people know about it outside of Australia. And I know the AFL is working hard to expand that footprint, and I hope that it can break through, because I think it's just a fantastic game. But I think exposing that and coming over here, you definitely you learn a lot, and you learn a different perspective, and you learn a lot of life lessons. So there's so much professional and personal development ultimately as well. So couldn't recommend it enough to those, and understanding it's not as easy as it is for everybody, obviously families and those challenges, but it's something that I'm truly passionate and really proud of being able to do. And I'm just really grateful for the opportunity with my employer in ASM Global. But, I'm learning every day, Sean, and I think that's the thing I ultimately love the most.
Definitely terrific advice. And yeah, I absolutely concur, understanding the experience that you have got in wherever you are is applicable in other places. You do have to learn some of those local intricacies in how fans move and some of the different ways that consumers behave. But when you are working with large volume stadiums or big clubs and getting people into stadiums, that's the language that you can talk internationally. And there's always ways to bring some of those examples into new markets and help. That information sharing piece you were talking about before is available, and there is a way to learn from different markets, but then also bring those new ideas across.
Couldn't agree more, Sean. And again, I think I always used to think that it would be one way, and I learned a lot from the US to one day take home with Australia. But I can tell you firsthand, there's a lot that I learned in Australia that I brought over here, and it's stuck like glue. So really, really, it's definitely a two-way street.
Well, I really appreciate you taking the time and catching up. I want to get to the Sports Geek closing five. Do you remember the first sports event you ever attended?
Yeah, it was an Essendon game. I can't say exactly what it was, but I've been an Essendon member, loyal Essendon Bombers member, for I think I'm up to about 26 years now. My dad won't let me get rid of it. So it was an Essendon game at the G, and, I've got a lot of memories along the way, and I can't say I've got a lot of fond memories since 2000, that's for sure.
Well, that is true, but you would have been a lot of Anzac days. We might have been in the stands of the MCG at the same time, so they're always a good contest. You've been lucky enough to be at a lot of different sports events and a lot of different stadiums, and you would have seen the food game level up in stadiums in your time. First of all, do you have a favourite food at a sports event or a favourite food memory?
Yeah, it's funny, and I'm going to sound really Americanized now here, Sean, but it's the curly fries from Battery Park where the Atlanta Braves play. And I remember I saw a friend out there that worked for the Braves, and I went and sat in the stands, and I got a burger and some curly fries, and I was obsessed with the curly fries. It was, if anyone was watching me, they would have been a little bit creeped out, but that's definitely going to be my go-to. And I'm a simple guy when it comes to that stuff. So a ballpark feed sort of does me really well.
Terrific. What's the first app you open in the morning?
It's always got to be WhatsApp, just purely given the international side of it. Mum and dad and the family group chat is on WhatsApp. So I generally wake up to a few messages given the time zone, and generally get a message out to mum or see some videos of my nephews and back home they're actually in Bali at the moment, but some photos and videos of those and be able to shoot a message quickly back to mum or dad.
Awesome. And is there someone that the podcast listeners should follow that you rate, and why they should give them a follow?
This is a controversial one, Sean, and I'm going to go King Ryan Garcia. And I follow him on social media, and I just think the way he's sort of Conor McGregor-esque. I think what he does for sport is fantastic, gets more and more people looking at boxing as a sport. And I mean, look what he just did with Devin Haney, right, aside from all the trials and tribulations that are going on at the moment. But I think just the way he engages and hypes up a fight somewhat makes you just realize, an interesting mind in its finest form is Ryan Garcia. So I've learned a lot off him in terms of just watching from afar, and I think it's an interesting piece just to show how different these sports people can be.
It is a unique one where an athlete actually is enough self-awareness and confidence at the same time to be able to share who they are and not worry about it. It's something that's very hard to teach, and it's really easy to really play it safe. So when someone's not, it really does stand out.
He takes it to a whole nother level, that's for sure.
And lastly, and you can answer this both personally, but then also maybe looking at it from a venue point of view, what social media platform is your MVP?
LinkedIn. I'm a big LinkedIn freak. I think you just get the best of both worlds, some professional stuff, but you also see a lot of personal achievements. And when you talk about earlier, like what we discussed in collaboration, I got a lot of friends in the industry, and when I see, their successes, honestly, I'm smiling through a screen, no different to an Instagram or one of those personal ones, more so than anything. So LinkedIn's definitely my MVP.
That is for sure. It is definitely a great way to connect with a whole bunch of people in the venue space, and all the vendors and all the different people that provide services around technology and wayfinding and helping people get into stage. LinkedIn is actually where everyone is, and that's where we will share this episode. Is LinkedIn the best way for people to reach out to you to say they listen to this podcast?
Absolutely, and I always say all along, if I can help anybody on that journey on transitioning over to the US or abroad, please just shoot me a message, and I'm more than happy to jump on a chat and just share my experiences, if anything at all.
Well, Eray, thank you very much for coming to the podcast. All the best for the upcoming Jags season and also all the events you're going to host at Everbank. I really appreciate you taking the time.
No problems at all, Sean. Thank you very much for having me, and take care.
Looking to help your digital or sponsorship team? Book in for a Pick My Brain session with Sean Callanan to help your team level up. Book now at sportsgeekhq.com/pickmybrain.
Thanks again to Eray Saban. You can connect with him on LinkedIn. I'll tag him on the LinkedIn post when I share this podcast. And there'll be links to his LinkedIn on the show notes. You can find the show notes at sportsgeekhq.com/381. Before I wrap up, I'd love to hear from you if you've got nominations for guests. I'm heading off to Las Vegas for Seat. I'm really looking forward to catching up with new people and people that I've known for a long time. I will most likely find a bunch of people that can come on the podcast. Who am I looking for? I'm looking for execs working for teams, leagues, or stadiums like Eray who are excelling at their role, where they're doing digital marketing, technology, commercial operations, all things I like chatting about. You can nominate someone at sportsgeekhq.com/nominate, or if you see me in person, potentially in Las Vegas, hey, tap me on the shoulder and tell me and nominate someone. Even if you want to nominate yourself, you're more than welcome to fill out that form or send me an email, Sean@sportsgeekhq, and nominate yourself. I'd love to hear from you. Until next episode, my name is Sean Callanan, and you've been listening to Sports Geek.
Do you get Sports Geek news? Sean Callanan analyzes the latest sports business articles for you weekly. Sign up at sportsgeekhq.com. Want to help drive more revenue from your digital efforts? Book a time for a call. Go to sportsgeekhq.com/phone call.